Here we have to discuss the data mining details. So actually the data mining deals with the pattern recognition, and also it deals with the kind of the data which is mined. Basically, they are in the two category. First is the descriptive. So whatever data we have to store, we have the descriptive manner. That means we have to use some table. We can represent each and every information in some relational background, and also we just use some uh, different table in the one connection. So if you search one information, it is easily available from the any kind of data set. So basically it is the descriptive, and second is the classification or the prediction. For the classification of prediction purpose, basically we are trying to find out the pattern of the data set. In the particular pattern, whenever the large data set is come, basically this large data set we have to analysis, and after the analysis we can get some pattern from this particular data set. So from this pattern, what we have done, we are classify this data according to the pattern. So when the classification is complete, according to the classification, in future, we can predict whatever the upcoming data is. So whenever we are going to prediction purpose, that is the one of the best use of the data mining approach. So here we have to just discuss the descriptive function. So descriptive function deals with the general properties of the data mining in the database. Basically, it is the part of the database. So whenever we have to go for the descriptive function, that is the just relation between data set. So I hope all of you know in the DBMS we are using the primary key, foreign key attribute. So here the basically the descriptive function is doing the same relation managing, and basically these are divided in the few parts. This is the class or concept description, mining or the frequent pattern, mining of the association, mining of the correlation, and the mining of the cluster. So the next we have to discuss the different kind of class concept description. So this is the first, where the very first is the data characterization. In this data characterization, we have to summarize the data within the class under the study. So when we have to just, here is use for the classification technique and creating one cluster. Within this cluster, we have to just store the data. So whenever we have to store the data, we have to identify the characteristics of this particular data and which is the target class for this particular data, and we are just send this particular data to this particular targeted class. Next is the data discrimination. Data discrimination is just for the if we use for the classification technique. So there are the some group, some class is available. Now within this class, we are unable to insert the data within this class. So actually this is called the data discrimination. This discrimination basically in the two parts. If you analysis between the two different class or two different cluster, so there are the discrimination between the two, between these two cluster nodes, and also sometimes some data are not relevant for the any kind of clustering technique. So this data is called the data discrimination. Now here we have to discuss the mining for frequent pattern. So how can we discuss that? So here is the mining in the frequent pattern. That means the we are going to the data mining process using the pattern also. So the frequent pattern are those pattern which is occur for the frequency in transactional data. Here is the list of frequent or pattern. So at the very first, we have to identify the frequent item set. So frequent item set is which is are frequently used. Suppose if you consider here example as milk and the bread, if we consider that how frequently they are using in our food list. So suppose we are using use some food all over the day. Now on that time we just use some milk and use some butter. separately, but this is not a frequent item set. When the both of them are coming at the same time in the table, this is called the frequent item set. Now we have to discuss about the frequent subsequence. So actually the a subsequence of a pattern that occur frequently, such a purchasing a camera in followed by the memory card. So subsequent is the here is the memory card. So you can easily identify if you purchase a camera, then you have to require the memory card. If you don't have the camera, we don't require for the memory card. So this is the frequent subset. So we can use that subsequence is nothing but a part of the data. When the main data, that means when the employee is available, so we can say the employee information or the employee details. If there is no employee, how can we connect that? And again for the frequent substructure, so substructure refer to different structure from such as a graph, tree, or tabular format. So what we have done in the database system, we can create one large table where all the information is available. But we can just represent the complete data in some graphical representation where is the graph format also, and sometimes we have to use the tree, and sometimes we have to use the table. But when we have to use the table, we are use the multiple number of table, and this multiple number of table are correlate between them. They have some relation between the table 1 and table 2 and table 3. So if you ask from the any instruction is come to the table 1, actually basically the information is stored in the table 3, they can identify in which the using the query, they can identify from the table 3, can store the data and give the information to the user. So here is the mining of the association. So basically the association are used for the process for a process of uncovering the relationship between the data and determining the association rule. So suppose we are going to some shopping mall or somewhere we have to buy some particular data, some particular item. Now you can see in some time there are the two individual items that are merged and they are sale at the same time. So this is nothing but a association rule. They have individually found that this both of the item are more of that case in the sellable. They just merge them and sell a complete product for the user. So there is the generally mining of the correlation. So we have to find out the correlation between the two item set, and also it is a kind of the addition analysis performed to uncover interesting statistical correlation between the associate attribute and the value pair, or between the two item set, as we have previously discussed. To analyze that, they are positive, negative, and whatever the result is come. So we just merge the two item set and sell at a one single item. And the next we have to discuss the mining of clusters. So basically the cluster refer a group of similar kind of object. So the cluster analysis refer the forming of group those who are in the similar nature. Those characteristics are near about similar and the high difference between the other cluster. If you consider there is the three cluster, so the difference between the cluster 1, 2 and 3 are the very high, but within this one cluster is C1 suppose. So within this one cluster there are the many number of nodes is available. So we can say that we can predict that within this one cluster the all the nodes characteristics are near about the same. For all the nodes, uh, pattern are near about the same. So here we have to use the clustering technique. So in the class, next we have to discuss the classification and the prediction. So first of all, we have to discuss the classification technique. So it predict the class of object whose class level is unknown. Its object is to find a derived model that describe and distinguish data class or concept. Next is the prediction. It is used to predict missing or unavailable numerical data. So prediction is that we have to predict something. We from the where we get information, how can we predict? We can predict from the historical data. We can predict from the previous data set. So analysis generally used for the prediction purpose. So we have some historical data. We just analysis this data. According to analysis, we just predict. I give you one example, simple example. Suppose you are just want to travel one location to another location. So before we start traveling, we just call the some cab, book some cab or some rent some cab also for some time. Now before we start any kind of travel, the cab person or the driver of this particular cab is saying you, yes, for this particular distance you have to pay this amount of money. So how he can predict that? He is not drive a single kilometer of distance. He is just identify the prediction basis of your previous history. He has found that yes, in this particular day, how much time is required to run the one location to another location, how much cost is for that, and depends upon that he can predict. Yes, you have to pay this much amount of money. So there is the prediction in the data mining process also. When we have the previous data, we just analysis this previous data and we can predict that. Third is the outer analysis. So outer analysis may be defined as a data object that do not comply with the general behavior or mode of the data available. And next is the evaluation analysis. Evaluation analysis means we are slowly evaluate, slowly change the data set. So evaluation analysis defines that if the customer requirement is slowly changed, here we can easily identify how can the evaluation is done. Suppose we can take one example. Slowly, in the Indian customer are moved to the online shopping. So when we have to go for the online e-commerce site, you can easily identify how the evaluation is done. Slowly, how the customer is involved the e-commerce site. So we have to use the evaluation analysis according to the previous history or previous data set. So next, here we have to discuss the data mining task primitive. So we can say a specify a data mining task is a form of the data mining query. So after all, there is nothing as task. We are writing some query for the data set and the algorithm is give the data from this particular large amount of data set. So this query is the input on a system. So this query is entered as an input. It can analysis within the data. So after the analysis, it can give some knowledge or give some idea about this particular data. Yes, this query is running, and after this query run, we can get some knowledge. We can get some data set. So next we have to discuss the data mining query is defined in term of data mining task primitive. So yes, we can say that in the data mining system, whenever we are writing the query, that is the base of the data mining task. So you have the task to find out the within one table, find out the whose age is the greater than 30. So you have to write a algorithm such kind of way. So how you can get the result. The next is the set a task relevant data to be mined. It is one of the important job that is who are the relevant data for the data mining. You can identify that if you go the real life, there is the lots of data is available. Those are not a actual data. This is a chunk of data. So we have to remove this data and the lots of data giving the wrong information also. So you have to remove this all the wrong information data and find out the relevant of the data. So basically data mining task is find the relevant data and after that you can just apply your algorithm or something. If you not identify the relevant data, then your algorithm is not working properly. Next is the kind of knowledge to be mined. Yes, when you have to run the program, when you have to run the data mining algorithm, you should get some knowledge from the data. So this is the knowledge to be mined. And next we have to discuss the background knowledge to be used for discovery process. So some background knowledge is nothing but a relation between the table. This is nothing but a graphical representation. This is nothing but a you can represent some way in the tree format where it is easy to understand, easy to explain. So on that particular purpose, we are using the background knowledge. And next in the interesting measures and threshold pattern evaluation. Yes, if you use that some graphical representation, if you use some graph, colorful graph, it is easy to understand and it's easy to understand by the layman also. So, and the next is the representation for the visualizing the discovered pattern. Yes, of course, you can use that visualization pattern. There are the different kind of tools is available. So within these tools, you can just implement that. And this is a colorful way you can represent this thing. And the next is the database attribute, which is used for the uh, data mining. So database, first we have to identify which attribute is relevant, and after that we can just add this attribute to the data mining procedure. And the data last one is the data warehouse dimension. So is interest. So data warehouse dimension is when we have to store the data that should be in the proper format. So that you have to maintain the hierarchy, you have to maintain the dimension, which dimension you want to store the data. So this is the task of the data mining. So we have to just come in the shorter format. So we have to first characterization of the data set, discrimination of the data set, association and correlation analysis, classification of the data set, and we can predict or prediction. Next is the clustering of the data set, find out the outer layer analysis, find out the evaluation analysis. So these are the basic tasks of the data mining. So here is the some rules and regulation. We cannot say this is a rules. This is a how can we represent some visual pattern? So basically, there is some rules. We cannot say this is the rules because there are the not a fixed formula for that. But you have to maintain some guideline. You have to maintain some guideline to discover a pattern. Second is the tabular format. The same thing. We just represent using some tabular format, table format. You can represent some chart option. So chart is nothing but a Gantt chart, pie chart. You can use any kind of representation to show the customer what is your analysis. Again, you can represent the graphical representation using some graph or some dimensional graph. You can use the decision tree. Yes, we can use the some decision tree, and within this decision tree we can also use some matrix also to representation the pattern of the data mining. And in the today's world we can use the cubes. Basically they are using the 3D cubes. So for the 3D representation we can implement the cubes also. I hope you